Welcome to Jerry's Fish Room.
All right, welcome back to Jerry's Fish Room. I am so glad you joined me this week. Again, man, big shout out to all of those that have subscribed. I'm up to 144. Man, I greatly appreciate what you've done as far as supporting this channel. Man, the views on the videos too are cranking, and I'm really excited about it. I'm so glad that you guys have jumped on board with this channel. Again, the goal, pushing to try to get to 200 is the next goal. But again, thank you so much. As you can tell, I am sitting in front of the 180 project. We are finished. Hopefully the fish will swim around. They're a little bit tied up in the corner. They're just a little skittish. I put them in there today. And so they now have their 180 gallon home. And so I wanted to just, I'm going to do a couple videos this week and next week. This week I'm going to talk a bit about lessons I've learned going through this project, and hopefully these lessons will help you. As well as next week, my plan is, you know, oftentimes we watch these videos and we go, okay, how much? What did it cost? What's involved? What are all the pieces of equipment and those types of things. And so next week I'm going to go over kind of everything I used to put this together, kind of put together a rough cost of what it cost me, give you hopefully some ideas that maybe will make it a little bit cheaper rather than going out and buying everything from scratch. So without further ado, let's get into it. So today's video, top 5 things I've learned. Okay, so top 5 things. Number 1, don't let the caulk get too warm. I spoke about this a little bit during the time that we resealed the tank, or I resealed the tank. I live here in Florida. The tank was sitting in the garage, and also left the aquarium caulk out there. And so one of the things I've noticed when I was doing it that I'll probably do a little differently is I might store the caulk inside the house. The caulk got a little bit loose and a little bit harder to manipulate and maneuver. And so while from a distance the caulk joints look okay as far as aesthetically, when you get up close there's some caulk that doesn't look so hot. Excuse me. And so you know, so I think the biggest thing I think I can draw from that is, you know, to maybe keep that caulk at a little bit cooler temperature. You know, some of the struggles I had with it was, you know, trying to make sure it was sealed up pretty solid, and, you know, and I got some heavy spots which don't look so good. But fortunately, this is about week 8, week 9 that this tank has had water in it, and it's going well. Holding water well, as you can tell from behind me. And so lesson number 1, definitely make sure you don't keep your caulk in a warmer climate or in a warmer environment. It gets a little bit harder to work with. Lesson number 2 that I learned. This one I kind of learned the hard way. So if you remember during this whole process, I bought some styrofoam blocks, put them together to try to give that 3D look, or that little bit of that depth and the hills and higher spots in the aquarium. And I assembled those with toothpicks. What I learned from that is we need to glue, lesson number 2, glue that caulk, or excuse me, glue that styrofoam together with aquarium caulking. That really holds it together well. That is how I fastened it to the bottom. But when I put the styrofoam blocks together, there were a couple of them that I just went ahead and put toothpicks in because that was the initial intent, and everything looked good. Then I started to put the gravel in, and then I started to fill it with water, and those that I did not caulk, put some caulking on, and I did put a little bit of caulking on some of it as an afterthought. 2 of them floated, and so that kind of killed a little bit of the effect, and I was just too far gone at that point with trying to go back in and try to fix it. You know, I just pulled the 2 pieces of styrofoam out, threw them out, and just you know, worked the substrate the best that I could. So lesson number 2, aquarium caulk your styrofoam. Again, remember, we use the styrofoam just to try to give us a little depth so that we weren't spending so much money on aquarium substrate. Now, styrofoam is safe. Just make sure you don't get like an algae resistant type styrofoam. You can get it at a craft store. I bought mine from Amazon. Very, very beneficial in not spending all that money on extra substrate to get those hills and valleys, which I was trying to accomplish. Lesson number 3, make sure, and I keep looking down, guys, because I got my list here on my handy dandy phone, but lesson number 3 is make sure you have enough substrate. I'll get into a little bit more where this became a little bit of an issue, but make sure you get enough substrate to get the depth that you want, especially when it comes to planting these plants. There were some spots that I had the substrate on the styrofoam, and it just wasn't quite deep enough, and it made it a lot more difficult to plant some of these plants. So make sure that you get enough substrate. If you're just going to do a normal like 2-inch bottom ish around on your tank, about 2 inches thick of substrate, what you're going to get seems to be running on an average of 1 pound per gallon on your aquarium is a good rule of thumb, and then you can go up from there. So in here specifically, I bought 7 bags of EcoComplete Black, and again used about 30 or 40 pounds of black sand that I pulled from the other tank because it had some beneficial bacteria in it. And so 140 pounds, 170 pounds, it wasn't quite enough. Again, the EcoComplete came in 20-pound bags. I bought 7 of them. Had some issues later with some of the plants, which I'll talk about, staying rooted down or keeping them down. And so I ended up having to go get another 20 pounds of substrate to assist with that. So make sure you have enough substrate when you're doing this. Again, a good rule of thumb for a good starting point, 1 pound of substrate for every gallon of water will get you a good substrate base. All right, so that leads us to lesson number 4. Leave the weights on stem plants. I called my local fish guy on this, the guy who I bought the plants, James at Community Aquatics, and he recommended it at best, if you could, it can go either way. You can leave the weights on or you can take them off. I chose to try to take them off and plant them that way, and I had about a 30% success rate with my plants staying rooted. Now, some of that I know a little bit of it was because I had some thinner substrate in certain spots, but the EcoComplete is a little bit of a coarse type substrate, and so stem plants don't have roots, and so you really need to get them down in there a good 2 to 3 inches. Probably 3 is better. And they're difficult to plant anyway, because even when you take the tweezers, you try to stick them down in the substrate, wiggle that substrate so it falls in on top of the stem and holds it. A lot of times I found myself having to reach in there with my hand or another set of tweezers or something to kind of move the substrate in. And unfortunately, about 70% of the Bacopa, that's the green plants that you see back here under the on the substrate. Those are stem plants. About 70% of them floated to the top. So I spent a good bit of time going back and getting them replanted and getting them resecured. And yes, I went back in and I added my weights back to those plants. I've read mixed reviews mostly on what I found is that those weights aren't going to do any damage to your fish. In fact, a lot of them, where they used to be made with lead, now they're made with a magnesium mix and supposedly aquarium safe. I know that Aquarium Co-op sells these weights to put on your plants, and so that's a trusted source for me. And so went back and on some of these bunches, or some of these Bacopa, specifically the Bacopa, I ended up putting the weights back in and burying them. So again, man, use the weights. If you buy stem plants, make sure you have weights, weight them down, get them buried down in that substrate until they get the roots growing. And then later on, if you want to, you can go back in if you're really concerned about it, pull those weights off, replant those plants, and move on. I think I'll probably just leave them there as long as I don't see any ill effect to my fish, which again, like I said, most places that I've done the research with, and of course Aquarium Co-op, they seem to be very safe, so I'm not really concerned about it. There is a little bit of information out there about whether or not it will restrict the growth of the plants. So you kind of roll with it. I know one thing, this has been a huge learning process for me. I've never done this before. And so, do your research and dig into it. But for me, if I use stem plants, I am going to definitely be weighting them in the future. All right, so leads me to number 5. The fifth thing that I learned from setting up this tank and doing this aquarium was the cycling process. Now, most cases, cycling a tank is pretty standard stuff in the sense that you get a little bit of beneficial bacteria in there. You can do some ghost feeding, maybe put a couple of small fish in to create a bio load. Wait about 4 to 5 weeks to get through the nitrogen cycle, so the fish create the ammonia, or the ghost feeding of the rotting of the food will create that ammonia, which will create bacteria, which will break the ammonia down to nitrite, and then ultimately that nitrite getting created in your tank will allow beneficial bacteria that will break the nitrite down to nitrate, and boom, you get rid of all your ammonia, get rid of all your nitrite. You're only left with nitrate. Nitrate you get rid of by doing water changes. You have a fully cycled tank. That can take about 4 to 5 weeks, and so that works well. But the difference between this tank and a regular tank is the plants. In here, I have an overwhelming amount of plants, as you can see, and so with a planted tank, part of the problem you run into is plants eat ammonia, plants eat nitrite, plants eat nitrate. So how do you feel comfortable enough to cycle a tank? Or how do you know that you can put fish in it without having any issues? And again, I did a lot of research on this, hit the normal channels, Aquarium Co-op, a few others. And one of the things I found out was the best thing you can do is wait for new growth. And new growth can be on the plants themselves, or it can be that thing that a lot of people don't like, and that's algae. So once you start seeing new growth on the plants or algae starting to develop in your tank is cycled as far as that is concerned, if you want to call it a cycle. And you'll start noticing that the plants are getting rid of the bad things that your fish can't deal with, the ammonia, the nitrate specifically. And so, I still test with Aquarium Co-op strips, and right now I'm running 0 ammonia, 0 nitrite. I feed my plants, my rooted plants, with root tabs, and then I use the Easy Green to handle my stem plants because they feed out of the water column. So with that being said, for me, it was about 3 to 4 weeks that I felt comfortable. About week 2, controversial or not, I went and felt like I had a little bit of algae going on, so I went ahead and I bought some mollies, which I was planning on leaving in the tank anyway. I wanted just a few live bearers in there with my discus, and let them run in there for about a week and a half, 2 weeks. They were doing absolutely tremendously fine, and so I felt comfortable enough between the mollies doing well and some more additional algae growth that I saw, a little bit of growth in my jungle valve, which is in the back there. And so felt real comfortable to move my discus in. And so again, was very leery, discus are not the cheapest fish around, and so wanted to be very careful with that. And so that's the fifth thing I learned. So now, wait for it. Yes, there's a bonus. Probably the biggest thing that I learned on all of this stuff is just one word: patience. This was a process. This overall, from the time I bought the tank, and again, a lot has to do with, you got to do life. So things, you know, come up in your life every day, and they kind of have a tendency to take precedence over this. And but it was probably about 3 to 4 months from the time I purchased the tank until I got here, probably closer to 4 months. You know, it's just a process. You know, I mean, the first thing I did once I got started, it took me about, you know, because again, I couldn't hit it all the time, but it took me a good day, you know, good 4 to 5 hours to strip the caulking down, and you know, another hour to get it all resealed. And then you got to wait for 3 days, 4 days until that caulk hardens up and creates that seal you're looking for. And then me, because I'm cautious, and 180 gallons was a lot of water, I didn't want to bring in something for into my house that was my first time doing a reseal. So I filled it with water in the garage, let it sit there for another 3 to 4 weeks to just be sure that we weren't going to have any problems. And then I was able to bring it in and start the process. And then the process of, you know, getting it in here, getting the substrate down, getting the styrofoam down, you know, getting the plants planted. You know, that was a good solid week or so to get all of that done. And then once I got all of that squared away, you know, I wanted to wait again. And so again, patience. Sometimes the hardest thing is you want this, the finished product, and you really need to wait. And you know, so patience is something I learned a lot. You know, I've picked that up during the hobby as I've moved forward. But on this particular project, it really has taught me to slow down, do each step, be careful with each step, make sure I've checked all the boxes, did everything right, don't get in a hurry, and then ultimately you will end up with something that will be very satisfying, but also will last for a very, very long time. So those are the 5 plus the bonus things I've learned from doing this 180 project. Again, absolutely enjoyed it, learned a lot from it. Would highly encourage you guys, maybe not on a 180, maybe a little bit of a smaller project, but go try this yourself. And you know, it's very gratifying to see that all of it come together as you do each of these steps, and then you ultimately get to come back in here and take a look at the final product, and just enjoy it for years to come. So guys, I appreciate everything you guys have done in supporting this channel. Again, if you liked the video, please hit that like button. Would just ask for you to subscribe. Continue to support the channel through subscription. The more we subscribe, the more likes we get, the algorithm kicks off, and the more people get to see this channel. Again, the purpose and the reason for this, for me, I enjoy, you know, doing the videos, but mostly I want to grow the hobby. I want people to learn as I learn, and hopefully this helps you. So please leave the comments below, guys. Really would love to interact with you guys. That's the one area that has not really taken off as much as I'd like to see it. And so if there's some videos out there you want to see me do, I would greatly appreciate you to leave those in the comments. We will be putting out eventually. I'm not sure how to do surveys and all that stuff, and maybe I'll do some research on that, or we'll just talk about it and then let you guys drop comments in. I am going to do a 20-gallon project, but it's not going to be Jerry's 20-gallon project. It's going to be you, the viewers' 20-gallon project. I'm going to let you build the tank through me. You're going to tell me what you like, what you want to do, what type of fish, the whole 9 yards. This is going to be a viewer's 20-gallon project, and I'm looking forward to doing it and hopefully interacting with you guys. But again, man, please hit that like button and subscribe. I greatly appreciate all of the support that you all have given me. And oh yeah, I almost forgot. You know what's coming. Keep loving the fish, guys. We'll see you next week.